obviously we know her family's real. Like, I feel like we can infer that pretty well, that she was not substantiating her entire family or things like that when she was 8. I mean,
it's not
saying
impossible.
Yeah, right. It's not impossible, but it's very not possible. You know what I mean? So
the glowing thing that she hides in the safe is the light weavings of all her brothers. Like,
oh my gosh. No, what the real thing is, we're gonna get to the end of this book, or end of book 10 or something in like 30 years, and it's gonna be like, and Shallan stopped light weaving, and
Shallan
everything
woke
disappears.
Up. Yeah.
Yes, everything disappears. Roshar itself was projected by Shallan.
Welcome back to Following Noah on a Stormlight podcast. This week is episode 230, and we are in chapters 8 through 11 of Wind and Truth. Eliot, how are you?
I'm doing excellent. This is the first reading section we've done where I've had the physical copy in my hand, which has been super exciting. Before this, we were using some of the preview chapters because the book hadn't released yet. But here we go. I have a gorgeous version of Wind and Truth in my hand, and I just love that feeling of a giant brick that I can leaf through the pages. It's been a joy.
I can echo that a little bit. I've been able to turn my audiobook up to 1.3 instead of a standard 1.0 from the preview chapter, so that's been nice. Paul, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Excited, of course, to talk about Wind and Truth. We're off to the races. It's been great. I have the physical book in hand, but I've been listening to the audiobook, or at least I listened to the audiobook on our way home, driving from Dragonsteel. I've just audiobooked this section, but I might switch back and forth reading an audiobook on given weeks in the future.
Sounds good. Before we get started, there's an announcement I would like to make. I've had a request, or several actually, on posting our chapter splits because we have several people reading or even rereading Wind and Truth with us. So if you are one of those people and you would like to know what future chapter splits are, I will do my best to say it at the end of the episode for the next week. And then also I will post a more extended, maybe a month out of chapter splits on our Discord. So if you go to our Discord and go to our podcast discussions channel, I will have those posted. I'll do my best to keep those updated over the next 6 months or so as we go through Wind and Truth. That being said, while I'm talking about it, this is 230. We're 8 through 11. 231 is 12 through Interlude 2. 232 is 14 and 15. And episode 233 is chapters 16 through 19. And that's as far as I've planned so far. Paul, do we have a new patron?
We do. I'm happy to announce. First, I want to give, of course, we want to say thank you to the patron. I also want to give a quick shout out to Brett and Jess, who visited us at Dragonsteel. They actually brought me this week's mug. I wanted to feature it, so we have a lovely Cornell mug. They knew I was a fan of The Office, so they brought a mug from Cornell, which was very sweet and thoughtful and much appreciated. But our patron of the week, we have a new surgeon, and it is Edwin, which is a very fun name, which I love. So Edwin, you are taped at a bit of a, like maybe a negative 10-degree angle or a 10-degree angle on my mug. I didn't realize. I did my best. Trevor started the episode while I was still putting it on here, so I did what I could. But Edwin, thank you very much for your support of the channel. We always need more surgeons around as we violently damage ourselves with our ridiculous theories and predictions. So much appreciated to have you on board. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Edwin. And thank you to everyone who came up to our booth at Dragonsteel. We did a special episode about Dragonsteel, but if you didn't listen to that one, thank you for everyone who came and said hello to us at Dragonsteel. It meant a lot. All right. Wind and Truth, chapters 8 through 11. Eliot, do you have 2 words to briefly summarize part of these chapters?
I do have 2 words, although true to form from the past, I'm going to cheat slightly and hyphenate some things. But my first word is surreality. My second word is book quartermaster.
Very nice.
And are we jumping right into what they mean?
Yep.
So surreality, I'm not 100% sure that's actually a real word, but I was looking for a fun word dealing with the kind of crazy surrealism that has started to surround our Shallan character. We've read a lot of books now. We've read a lot of Stormlight archive pages. I thought I'd gotten past the what the heck is going on moments. And then I read chapter 11 and was like, what the heck is going on? There were several moments in here where Shallan is yet again breaking rules and doing weird things. And honestly, I need to talk about it with you guys to even figure out what's going on. Book quartermaster, which I don't think the book hyphenates, but I am, for purposes of my 2 words here, book quartermaster, I thought was the cleverest and, for some reason, most hilarious way to refer to a librarian I've ever heard. So I'm now going to find an excuse somewhere in my life to address a librarian as a book quartermaster, because that's what Kaladin thinks they are, because he doesn't know what a librarian is, but is very familiar with what a quartermaster is. I thought that scene was pretty hilarious.
Paul, do you have 2 words for part of the episode?
I do. Mine were a bit easier, and they are actually just 2 words. Eliot, I'm calling you out. Book quartermaster as a word. We've done some crazy stuff, but that's a bold one to come out with.
Yeah.
Just don't worry about
My
it. Just don't
2
worry about it.
words. Yeah. My 2 words are simply night and day. I have a couple minor connections to this. One, it looks like we're going through the days. Day 1, I assume day 2, day 3, onward. So day and night, 2, I want to give a bit of contrast of the Kaladin Zeth story is what I'm very tuned into and very eager to see. And while it may not be a complete day and night situation, it's that we're looking at an interesting dynamic of characters in Kaladin and Zeth being together, and Nightblood, if you want to throw Nightblood in there to add to my night theme. I'm very curious how that kind of dynamic works out, of course. We just have differing personalities and people going on here, as well as I want to compare the difference between like Kaladin's story, which has been very pretty thus far, very uplifting and encouraging for a drastic change, to now Shallan being in quite a bit of trouble, aka night, I guess. So a bit of a stretch all the way around, but day and night, those are my 2 words.
Sounds good. All right. Let's start with chapter 8 and chapter 9, because they kind of go together. Kaladin and Zeth are about to take off to Shinovar, and chapter 8 opens with Nightblood talking to Kaladin. I'm trying to think, how many people has Nightblood actually talked to? Nightblood's talked to Lift before, and Zeth, obviously, and Vasher. Is there anyone else on that list?
I mean, of our Stormlight characters, no. Doesn't Nightblood technically talk to Vivenna?
Yes, in Warbreaker
right,
he does.
but
Yes.
yeah, that doesn't matter
And
too much.
Nail. Yeah.
Nail. Yeah.
Okay.
You might be right about that. Is there ever a moment where Nightblood ever talks to like Taravangian or Dalinar in the previous books? I don't think so, but
I don't think so either.
remember.
I don't think so. But Kaladin and Nightblood are having a conversation, which I was not anticipating. That's an interesting dynamic between Kaladin trying to do what's best, trying to figure out what's best for himself and everyone else around him. And then you have Nightblood, whose pure instinct is destroy evil. So I wonder if Kaladin and Nightblood might have some like philosophical debate about what evil is.
I feel it's funny that
honestly-
we're talking about Kaladin and having philosophical debates, by the way. You mentioned that,
Yeah.
and I just want to point that out, that is quite crazy that that's the conversation we're having.
I'm actually looking forward to what Kaladin and Nightblood might have to say. I'm with you, Trevor. This feels like a momentous occasion that someone else is speaking with Nightblood, but I don't know if it's just going to be more banter, because Nightblood is definitely full of banter, or is Kaladin going to try and have serious conversations with Nightblood, and where's that going to go? I don't know.
Yeah. Kaladin packs his bag. I think Leighton makes his bag for him. And did you guys see it? There's a rock that makes his way, a small pebble that makes its way into Kaladin's bag. And Leighton's like, whoa, how'd that get there? And then Kaladin says, oh, no, it's fine. I'll just grab it. Don't worry about it. That is a point on the board for my TN theory. Just saying it.
I do agree.
Is that a direct? Is that one a direct reference? I meant to look this up, and I actually forgot to go back and look. Is there a scene like way back in the day where Tien is like looking at a rock and like, hey, Cal, there's cool patterns on this rock? Isn't that a thing?
Yes. Tien's two things are cool rocks and pouring water on them to, figure out or look at the strata underneath the dirt, and his toy little horse, which in the Stormlight timeline here, Kaladin just found like yesterday. So
I was going to say, we have been finding a lot of points towards Tien, which I'm excited for. Selfishly, I don't want to see Trevor's bingo board and predictions all come true and mine not. However, that's pretty good, pretty neat. I feel they are pretty intentional. I feel like those are rather deliberate. Yeah, I did pick up on that. That was quite interesting.
There wasn't too much else in the Kaladin section. Chapter 8 was actually really short. Just a couple paragraphs for Kaladin, and then we go to Shallan. Shallan is under attack, which we can actually talk about the majority of this attack scene for this episode. Shallan and Adolin are under attack. They getting lashed back and forth. They're fighting like 8 fused or heavenly ones, and there's only like 4 windrunners or something like that. But there's this one line that I might be like overanalyzing in chapter 8. But chapter 8, Shallan is under attack and she's been lashed by Drei. And at the very end, the last 2 lines of chapter 8, Shallan has internal dialogue that says, "Be Drei." And she then manipulates the lashing. She absorbs the Stormlight of Drei's lashing that Drei has put on Shallan. And I was like, okay, hold on. You've just manipulated a surge binding of another Radiant. We have not seen that before. I feel like this has huge implications, and it was kind of just dropped in there.
I feel like this is massive, like super massive. Like think about the destruction that Szeth reigned in all those scenes we saw back in the day, where he would just take on whole armies. If you could, instead of being affected by his lashings, just absorb them as he's like lashing you to things, and maybe even feed your own surge binding with it, you're like immune to other radiants. that's not necessarily like what Shallan is doing here, but I'm kind of thinking forward to like what's a more even, advanced version of what she's doing. But yes, the ability to cancel out someone else's surge binding, that's got to be massive.
Do you think that this would apply to any other Radiant Surge binding, or only Radiants of a like order, or a bind or a surge that
Well-
you share?
Lightweavers and Windrunners don't share anything. She absorbed Drai's Windrunner lashing and turned it into her Stormlight.
Oh, I was misunderstanding. I thought we were talking about Syl that was doing this.
No,
to
this is
Drai's.
Shallan. She's been lashed by a Windrunner, and she
Oh.
cancels it. She cancels it.
And I,
Yeah, I see. Okay. Yes, I was definitely misunderstanding. I'm trying to make this not so big of a deal. I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that this is specific to her having 2 radiants and having more fortune or things like that?
Well, and this is actually a good question. This might even be like Shallan specific, not just to not just like too cryptic, like she's bonded to cryptic specific that we've talked about, but it might be like Shallan can pretend to be other people, and she might have pretended to be Drahi, in which case she manipulated her capital I identity and then flipped the lashing because now she's Drahi, and that's a weird Shallan thing.
So that's where my head starts to go. And I actually didn't notice this on my first read, but then after reacting to it in our Discord, somebody pointed it out to me in there. And I think that might be exactly what she's doing here. She is changing her identity to be Drahi so that she can then interact with his investiture, his keyed investiture. I'm trying to use terms from the Lost Metal that we learned, and I can't quite remember them all.
Yeah.
That, I wonder if anyone can do that. Like theoretically, anyone can do that. But maybe Shallan can do that much easier than others because of her kind of crazy identity stuff that she's got going on. She's got multiple personas going on within her already. Maybe she's far more well positioned to temporarily view herself as someone else, whereas like a Kaladin is just never going to be able to do that. Kaladin has a very distinct, clear like identity of himself. So like, is it necessarily a Shallan thing? My gut want to says no, but Shallan is able to do this because of her unique background in history. Maybe. And to go a little bit Cosmere wide with this, pull on some of our Mistborn knowledge, we know there's things like ferrochemical metal mines that can change your identity. We've seen that. And so now this is back in the like crossing magic paths and whatnot. If you could use that power to change your identity to either like lack of identity or someone else's identity, either through whatever Shallan's doing here or through ferrochemy or whatever other magic system you've got, is this going to be possible in even more ways than we've just now seen? Like, is this going to be something that some of our crazy world hopper folks can do? Is don't trust completely in your lashings now, because shoot it over at Ghostblood World Hopper X and they might just turn around and absorb it.
Yeah, that's where my brain went. I don't know if I have answers, but I'm leaning more towards, like you said, Eliot, anybody could theoretically do this, but Shallan is uniquely equipped to adapt to this on the fly. So
that's my guess.
That's where I'm leaning as well.
But okay, here's another crazy question though. That logic path checks out for me. Still crazy that she can do that. What's maybe even crazier though, why does she know to do this?
Yeah.
Why does she even know this would work? Who taught her that if she can view herself like Drahi enough, she can change his investiture? How does she know that?
I don't know. Maybe there's some off scene or off camera scene in Lasting Integrity. She chatted with somebody. I don't know.
I feel that investiture has a lot of intuitiveness to it. That are highly invested characters, they eventually figure these things out or stumble into them. I have no idea if that's an intentional result of their bonds to their spren or the investiture that they have. I mean, we do get glimpses of like whenever they suck when Kaladin sucks in Stormlight, he feels it compelling him to use like the Stormlight wants to be used, if that makes sense. And so I wonder, for me, it's not too much of a stretch that she would stumble into something like this, but it is quite a crazy thing to stumble into. My mind is racing on how far could it go.
Yeah.
I don't think this is what we'll see, but could she make her identity that of Corvellium or Teravangian or Tanavast? That's where my mind is going. Could her identity reflect one of those characters, one of our shards, and
Or
somehow impact how they handle their investiture?
just had a brainwave. Could you take the place of a herald? If you pretend to be a herald and then go get sent to Braze and take their place.
That's a good question.
Keeping with Shallan for chapter 9 and chapter 11. Oh, actually, let's stop for a spell check. We haven't done one of these in a hot second. We have a new character introduced to us in Wind and Truth here in chapter 8. And this is his title is the Monarch, but he has a name, which we'll do a spell check on here. I forget the format here. Do we do Paul goes first and then Eliot spells it and then Paul? No. Paul tries to spell it.
Now, if you're new to us, this is a bit that we've done for a while that's unique to the fact that I always read the physical book, and Paul most of the time does the audiobook. And we've learned across the years in the books that there's some interesting nuances and changes in experience that you get versus those two mediums. One of which, maybe the biggest, is names. And so I've read the name on the page, so I can attempt to guess at how it's pronounced, which I think I have to do first, or Paul reveals information to me that makes my job easier.
Yes.
So
Eliot has to go first.
With that said, Shallan does battle with a fused. He has a fun title of the Monarch, but I'm guessing that his name is pronounced Abidi. I think it's Abidi.
Paul?
Okay. I'm a bit relieved because so what I do is I hear the name. I heard the name Abidi, and I just give basically my first guess of how do I think that name is spelled. Sometimes I write that down and I hear Eliot read it off the page, and it's nothing like what I thought it would sound like. And I'm sent scrambling. But Abidi is what I heard, and so I went with a simple spelling of Abidi. Abidi.
You're correct.
Spot on.
I did it.
I want to chime in here on the preview chapters. The week after this is when I started listening to the SoundCloud audio that they released. So I read this name and I pronounced it in our preview chapter as Abadi. I thought it was Abadi the Monarch, which it is Abidi. So Paul, you're correct, and Eliot, you're also correct that it is Abidi is how they say it in the audiobook. But I would have got that wrong.
If you are new to our podcast, go back to one of our first 5 episodes and go watch Paul almost correctly spell Rock's Horneater name based off of just hearing it in the audiobook. It's pretty incredible. Most epic 30 seconds of our podcast. Go check it out.
I think it's episode 7.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it was episode 7. That was my famed moment. I was not correct, but I was pretty close. I think we even have a clip of that you can look up of me trying
Yeah.
to spell it. So yeah, that was one I remember I missed a lot early on trying to overcomplicate them, and I learned to go with your gut of simple spellings. Does not always work out, but Abidi. Are we going to talk about Abidi now?
Yes. Okay. So we have Abidi, and there's a little bit of a sparring match between Shallan and Abidi, and Shallan makes the observation of these heavenly ones are not doing their honorable sparring that they used to do back in Rhythm of War. They're actually trying to kill us. And they go back and forth. They fall into the bead ocean. Shallan makes a little room for herself. We'll talk about that later, maybe. And then Abidi is like kind of making fun of her, making fun of light weavers in general. And he says, the rest of the fused are insane. I stay sane by bathing in the blood of Knights Radiant. I'm like, yeah, that seems really sane, dude. Like, you sound like a pretty level-headed guy.
Whatever works for you, man.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So Shallan's like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then I think Abidi stabs her. Shallan makes Radiant, like an illusion of Radiant behind him or next to him. Abidi immediately dismisses it, and then Radiant stabs him through the chest. And we get the epic line of, reality is what I decide it to be. Oh boy. Oh boy.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
Okay, so who wants to tackle reality is what I decide it to be? There's another quote later on which makes me feel a little bit better about this, but I read that, and this is actually split between two preview chapters. So we got that line and waited for a week for the second follow-up quote, which makes me feel a little bit better. But reality is what I decided to be. There's a lot to unpack there.
I want to start by saying, Trevor, if this from what I know about you and your view of magic systems, if this was near the end of the book, or if this was a more pivotal moment at like the end of a book, you would probably be a little bit miffed, because it feels like Shallan is kind of getting some extra superpowers, extra boosts here with absorbing other people's surge binding, manipulating identity and fortune, and making physical, tangible light weavings. Radiant comes and what the Monarch Abidi scoffs, the classic moment where the villain scoffs, says, haha, that's not gonna hurt me, and then they die, and
Yep.
it was quite a reveal that this is possible. And isn't the word on the street that this shouldn't be possible still? Is this something that's linked to her double bond, making her a bit special, being able to tap into fortune, things like that?
Abidi has a term for it, and he calls it substantiation.
Yes, that's right. Substantiation.
Which sounds like another term for like a surge binding, because there's, gravitation and adhesion. Substantiation would feel like it would slide right in there. I don't think that's what it is, but substantiation is like giving actual substance to your light weaving, which apparently was forbidden.
Eliot, do you have any thoughts? If not, I have something I want to tack on to Trevor's comment on substantiation, but it's a bit ridiculous and probably not true. So I'm gonna keep the conversation relevant first.
I'll throw in a thought, and then you go crazy on us. The only other thing I feel like I pulled out of there was Abidi goes, "Wow, substantiation! I thought that was forbidden for your kind. I must go tell Odium this right away." And that's like the second half of the conversation that I think happens in chapter 11. And then he literally like runs away, I think, in that moment. Or maybe they keep fighting and the other guys take him. Yeah. And so that was interesting. He knows what this is. Maybe it's been done before by Radiance, but then for some reason was forbidden and is news that Odium needs to know. Like, that sounds big.
You You want to hear my quick 2-second theory?
Absolutely.
I think we had a crazy cult of Lightweavers on Ashen that went crazy because they made their own reality. And then when they destroyed Ashen, they're like, yeah, we're not going to do that anymore. So Lightweavers, don't do that, please. We need to stay anchored. That's my 2-second pitch.
See, it's most people's
I will say
dream to be able to make. Oh, go ahead, Eliot.
Well, yeah, I'll give it to you to go wherever you want to go with it in a second. I was just going to say that the possibilities of this actually seem kind of crazy. Because up until now, Shallan has been able to create illusions of just about anything she can draw. If she can draw it, if she can form it, if she can understand the details of it, she can create a very convincing visual version of it. If she can create physical things of anything she can think of, that I feel like is a whole door open to another level of power that Shallan would have. I'm thinking of simple stuff like there's no lock in the world that can stop her now. She can just form a key. There's no she can build whatever the heck she wants to from straight investiture. Are we like turning investiture straight into matter? I don't know. We could theorize on this. We probably don't have enough to do that now. If more comes up on this, I probably will go crazy with some kind of explanation at some point.
Minecraft creative vote.
Yeah, literally, Shallan has.
Yeah,
it's become evident that Shallan has different rules from everybody else right now.
Yes.
She is getting so many extra tools to basically do. World is her oyster. Like she can do whatever she wants, and no one can stop her right now. It's kind of crazy. We talked about this, I believe, at the end of Oathbringer. Once we were learning more about light weaving and things like as we were coming through Words of Radiance onward, we talked about, could light weavers like light weave armies of people, right? Like, could you make a horde? And I think we ended up resting that as no, you could make you can make it look like you have an army, but you don't actually have an army. They can't do anything.
Yeah, and Shallan's kind of done that before. She's done that of like, go fight these illusions while I go talk to the Oathgate Spren at the end of Oathbringer. Stuff like that. But there's nothing actually there.
Yeah, exactly. So the question is now, I'm assuming that this will be limited by investiture and the effort that it takes, that she could not sustain creating a physical army with her light weaving powers, that would not be sustainable or attainable. But I am like, if we have a situation where Dalinar opens up his portal of investiture and she's flooded with investiture, could she just keep pumping out soldiers and physical soldiers like infinitely? That seems pretty overpowered.
What if you had a dual bond of a light weaver and a bondsmith? You had both bonded the sibling and a cryptic.
Ooh, what?
That'd be wild. So Trevor, one of the things I wanted to go, and this is quite extrapolating, theorizing, something I think would be cool as an extra added layer to what we know about surge binding. For the record, I don't think this is going to happen, but please make this a back half thing. So they mentioned substantiation. They say you should not be able to use substantiation. And Trevor, you pointed out that sounds like our surges. Like I briefly pulled up the list of surges. You have adhesion, gravitation, division, abrasion, progression, illumination is what we're using here. So she uses substantiation. Shallan, as we know, has a unique situation where she is bonded to 2 Spren and has, because of that, she's able to tap into capital F fortune, all sorts of things. She is now using substantiation. I'm wondering if there is like a hidden, a secret menu, if you will, of surges. If there are like, so with, I'm just gonna say one per. Let's say one per order. Where if you have what I believe that Lightweavers have illumination and transformation.
Yeah.
That if you are able to tap into fortune or whatever Shallan has going on here, bonded to 2 cryptics, she is able to use this substantiation, right? I don't have any specific theories on like, okay, if you use adhesion and gravitation and you're bonded to 2 of that spren, what adhesion gravitation, that's Windrunner, right?
Yes.
If you're bonded to 2 honor spren, do you get some substantiation equivalent? I don't even know what that would be. I can't even wrap my head around it.
It'd be like magnetization or something.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, exactly. Something like that. Magnetization, something crazy like that. Is it possible that there's others of these? We are seeing substantiation, but like we learn from the first time we're ever introduced to a surge binding whatsoever, where we see Zeth at the beginning of the book, you're like, there's got to be more, right? There's got to be more of these things, So I'm thinking I think it'd be cool if there's more substantiations out there, and
Yeah.
there's, like I said, the secret menu of surge binding.
You mean like alloys of our current powers that we have?
Exactly. That sentiment. Absolutely. No idea what that might look like. Like I said, this is quite a bit of a thrown it Hail Mary kind of prediction that there's more stuff here. But, I think it's just as possible as to be real as it is to not be real. Maybe not a full 10, but there may be others. If you start messing around with multiple bonds, some crazy things might happen.
Yeah. So I wonder if we go crazy, like literally crazy, without reining this in, and that's why like the Nahel bond exists. That's why the Knights Radiant and Noadon kind of established rules on all this as we got to Roshar, because as we know, Ashen was destroyed by surge binding. So if there is a secret menu and you start blowing stuff up with lasers and black holes and stuff, like, oops,
magnetization, like you said,
yeah,
and
like
it could
you
get
accidentally
really
like reverse pull the ends of the earth and the planet collapse on itself. Like, oops. Like,
I mean, think of what it could be if there's some secret menu behind Division, right? There's some
Right.
crazy stuff. I bet you could get really crazy. I'd actually be really curious if anyone listening has any just like, thoughts, predictions, like hypotheticals. If a Dustbringer had a secret menu surge binding item, what do you think it would look like? Definitely comment or come to our Discord, because I'm ready for this discussion.
but I got to rein us in, because Brandon reins us in chapter 11 with this quote. It makes me feel a lot better about all this. Shallan is talking to Adolin kind of in the aftermath of the battle and says, I created Radiant. I could have created you. Maybe that's why you're so wonderful. I said reality could be what I imagine it to be, but I don't actually want that. That would be terrifying. I am so grateful that this line is in here, because I was terrified. And she's actually had a line like this before. I don't know if you guys remember back in like Oathbringer, she's talking to Pattern and she freaks out that she's like fabricated her whole family. And she's written letters to herself, like between herself and her brothers. And Pattern is like, hold on, Shallan, like that's a big deal if that you're actually doubting that. We need to take a break. Hold on. Like, your brothers are real, I promise. And Shallan just starts doubting everything. And I'm also beginning to start doubting a lot of what Shallan tells me. So I don't know. Maybe she's right to be freaking out. Anything else before we get to some Ba-Ado-Mishram in chapter 11?
I am excited to talk about Ba-Ado-Mishram, but I just want to tack on that, yes, Shallan has been a bit of a questionable narrator or source of information, but I think I'm learning to trust her more. That sounds funny, but she certainly has moments like that. But it's very clear to us as the reader that no, obviously we know her family's real. Like, I feel like we can infer that pretty well that she was not substantiating her entire family or things like that when she was 8. I mean,
It's
not
not
saying
impossible.
yeah, right. It's not impossible, but it's very not possible. You know what I mean? So
The glowing thing that she hides in the safe is the light weavings of all her brothers. Like,
yeah. Oh my gosh. No, what the real thing is, we're gonna get to the end of this book or end of book 10 or something in like 30 years, and it's gonna be like, and Shallan stopped light weaving,
And
and
Shallan
everything
woke up.
disappears.
Yeah.
Yes, everything disappears. Roshar itself was projected by Shallan, etc. Yeah, I think that's how it'll end.
Okay.
All that I'll say is that your ridiculous theory that Shallan is Lightsong is becoming less and less crazy the further we go down this Shallan path.
Exactly.
That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I called it.
Yeah, I mean, Shallan could feasibly be Lightsong at some point in the future. So, yeah, we've been saying it this whole time, or Paul has. All right, Ba-Ado-Mishram. Adolin and Shallan are hanging out in this little house of beads that they have in Shadesmar. The wall of the beads like forms a freaky face, and I quote, "I will kill you. I will burn everything you love. I will exact vengeance in a river of blood. I will rampage across the world until not a single human remains, drawing breath. Betrayers, thieves, monsters. I will send you back to the flames from whence you..." And then Adolin smashes her with a hammer. So she seems like a nice lady.
Yeah, that's who we're trying to go chat with.
Mm-hmm. Apparently, that's also who we locked up for seemingly good reason.
It's going to be fine.
Do y'all have any thoughts in your mind that this is or is not actually Ba-Ado-Mishram?
I think it is, and I think Shallan and Ba-Ado-Mishram now have a capital C connection, or at least the beginning of one. So I think that's why we're seeing this. She's getting a version of a Dalinar vision, and we're about to go chat with her, in 20 chapters or whatever.
Okay. I mean, I certainly agree. I think this is. However, I wanted to point out that there's a lot of. I feel like up until this point, we're kind of pointed in the direction that Ba-Ado-Mishram might not be bad, might not be evil. I think this
until that line.
Yeah, I was going to say, then this line came up, and I was like,
Yeah.
well, I'm not certain. And I will say, I'm a bit relieved. I think our Unmade are very, very awesome and cool. But I think our Unmade are designed to be evil. I know there's a lot of Unmade apologists out there. We met a lot of... I definitely heard from a lot of Unmade apologists at Dragonsteel.
Yeah.
But I think their purpose is to be the bad guys right now. And
so what I'll say on this is the Unmade that we've talked to the most, Ja-Anat, is like genuinely misunderstood. I think Ja-Anat does have potential to be chaotic neutral as opposed to, chaotic evil. However, I do think the other 8 are pretty equivocally in the evil category. Now, let me also put an asterisk there. They may not have always been and could have been corrupted by Odium. Whatever the Unmade were originally, I think you could be an apologist for. The Unmade in their current form, I think is fine to say they're evil.
No, I certainly agree. I do think that they were likely corrupted or something like that. I hope we find out more about that, more about their origin. I think that would be awesome. But yeah, I think this was kind of Brandon being like, all right, guys, we had fun exploring Ja-Anat and the idea of, maybe our Unmade are going to join the good side. I think this says no. I don't think they are.
This is Brandon saying, if something bad happens to Ba-Ado-Mishram, don't feel sorry for her. She don't.
Yeah, exactly.
She is evil. Period.
And yet, we've got some hints. We've got some hints that Ba-Ado-Mishram is linked to something incredibly foundational about Roshar.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's hints about like a previous form of Ba-Ado-Mishram, like prior to being unmade, those kinds of things. But evil in her current state, I can get on board with that, especially based on this comment here. Is there going to be more to it than we think? I want to say definitely yes.
Yeah, I agree.
I do agree with you, especially with how much has been set up in this book surrounding Ba-Ado-Mishram, with Kalak talking about her and things like that. It seems very geared towards there being it being a more of a complex situation.
Last thing on Shallan. Eliot, you have what is the Grand Nell in the outline? Was that from this week or last week? Did we forget to talk about that?
No, that's this week. So this, I don't think we have any context for this whatsoever, unless you're about to blow my mind with some crazy knowledge that you've got from Words of Brandon or something.
I am.
In
but go ahead.
chapter, ooh, okay. In chapter 11, the who are we with? Drehi is our windrunner here. He has a compass. Navani, I think, has built him this cool compass that it doesn't point north. It points to a specific point that they know. So you can use it to navigate just like a compass, because you can measure like angles and degrees and stuff like that. So that's what they're doing. That's how they're getting to Azamir, where they're trying to get to. He just kind of off the hand says, oh yeah, I've got this compass. It's super nice. It always points to the Grand Nell, source of the current, capitalized, death of a god. And then just like moves on as if like, well, obviously, like, yeah, all of those things make sense to everyone.
Let me keep reading. Not at all ominous, Shallan said. It gives us a bearing, Drehi explained. That's always pointing to the Nell. I know the angle from lasting integrity we were to take, and I don't think we've strayed too far. And then they move on.
Right.
Yeah, what's the Nell?
Yeah, it's just a cool name. The Grand Nell. I'm thinking like a bell. Doesn't a bell have like a knell?
A Nell, yes, you are correct. A Nell, for you, if you guys who don't know, it is a tone, like a bell toll, like dong. That's a Nell. And so, yes, with the short context we have here, the Grand Nell, source of the current, capital C, the death of a god. Okay. Well, which god? Are we talking about Adonalsium, or are we talking about Threnody?
Which god?
Yeah.
Which god? Why is a sound a place? Because it only makes sense if this is a fixed place on Roshar. And what the heck is capital C current?
So I lied. I don't actually have a cool words of Brendan for you. But my cool theory, my cool words of Trevor for you is I think this points to the shattered plains. I think the Grand Nell may have shattered the plains, and the death of the god we're talking about is honor. I think honor may have died on the plains, and the Grand Nell is the cytonic sound that shattered the plains.
Interesting.
I really want it to be Paul to that. I actually really like your theory there, Trevor. I think I would probably say that that's the same thing as well. With the current, I've been really leaning into it this book with the information we got in Rhythm of War and picking up and going through this book. I feel like these elements of sound waves and music or tones, all these things, I feel they're becoming more and more relevant, more and more frequent in their notice. And I'm wondering if we're going to get some more information on this. And I'm thinking that the current may be what I'm thinking of or have been hinting at this time. Maybe the current refers, maybe that's the Alethi way of talking about these like I don't know, not the rhythms of the Parshindi, but similar. I don't know. They talk about the tones of Roshar. I have a feeling that this is just correlated to that or related to that. But it is interesting. I'm like, yeah, how is a sound a place? I'm not certain.
My only theory that I was going to run with was, and I'm slightly biased by my bingo card because if this is true, then we're headed in that direction. Perhaps the source of the current, the Grand Nell, is the origin, and current might mean like
Okay.
ocean current.
Yeah.
And we've got like ocean currents that are emanating from the origin, and then you can now start to say like, oh, okay, death of a god. Yeah, did honor actually get splintered at the origin, not even on the continent of Roshar or something crazy like that? Is that like, the high storms started coming out of the origin when honor was splintered on it or something to that effect?
I like that too. Anything else for Shallan? We've got some more Kaladin stuff to talk about. All right. Kaladin is saying goodbye to Scar from Bridge 4. Scar is is Teft 2, apparently, for this book. In fact, Kaladin even kind of says that. You kind of remind me of Teft in training all the new recruits. And Scar is tossing a bunch of spears out the window to train his new recruits. I thought that was quite funny. And then we get into our library scene. But anything else with Scar before we go to chapter 10?
Don't they mention that Scar is? I'm trying to remember. Scar is one of the original like bridgemen, right? Like when Kaladin gets introed into the bridge crew.
He's one of the original like 8 that are named in the Way of Kings, and then Lopin's added, and then we get Relaine added, and people start trickling in after that. But Scar is one of the original 8.
Yeah, that's all. I just think that's pretty neat. Pretty neat.
Scar and Dre are always mentioned like in the same sentence, so I don't know. All right, Sylphrena has checked out a book, a very specific book. We are bringing the Way of Kings with us to Shinovar. I was freaking out on the preview chapters when I read this. I was like, Kaladin is going to read the Way of Kings. I am here for it. I named the podcast correctly. Let's go.
I didn't even put that together until you wrote that in the outline, and you're absolutely right. Kaladin is picking up the Way of Kings. Of course, I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. That's awesome. He's going to start learning from some wisdom from our Noadon guy. And then you put it into words, and you're absolutely right. Kaladin is following Noadon.
Yes, he is.
Exactly. So we talked about, are we going to see Noadon again? This might point to it because Noadon's the author, right? But hopefully we'll get some form of Noadon content, which would just really save us because we were named this since the most recent book was Oathbringer.
Yeah.
So we really took a gamble on that.
If there's one fan of the in-world copy of Way of Kings, it is me. I am very excited. Anytime I get any reference to the in-world copy of the Way of Kings, I think that is such a cool concept to put in your book, Sanderson. So thank you for that, and thanks for bringing it back. Kaladin and Syl. Any Kaladin and Syl shippers on this podcast yet?
Nope, not yet.
It's
they make for good friends, but yeah,
it's getting a little out of hand. This chapter was ramping it up even further. The flirting is becoming rather outright, almost even more so on like it seems to be coming a lot from Syl. And yes. I don't know if this is just Syl becoming more human and starting to explore like that side of being human, the romance and the feelings of love. Like that's absolutely part of what being human is she just like exploring that on the only person she's super close to? Or is this truly like all out romantic attraction that we've got budding here. It's, I don't know.
I also don't know.
I also don't know. It was a bit interesting, and I'll just be frank and say it was certainly not my favorite. I was kind of waiting to get past it and on to the next thing. I genuinely think that thus far, that has been my only qualm. I'm waiting to see if this is just a little moment to be silly and we're moving on, or if it's going to go somewhere with Kaladin and Syl falling in love. Maybe Kaladin will substantiate Sylfrena at the end of the book and they'll fall in love. But
There you go.
I don't know. Even still, I would find that a bit odd.
I will say, up until these early Wind and Truth chapters, I thought the Kaladin Syl shippers were not only like weird, but completely unfounded. I thought it was like you are really stretching to try to make this a thing. Unfortunately, I no longer think that. There is enough in these early chapters where I'm like, darn it. there may be something here, unfortunately.
And I will say, Trevor, before this book, I didn't actually think it was weird. I thought it was just fun. Like, haha, Kaladin and Syl, what if they got male-weed?
Right.
And I'm like, that's fun and goofy, and I like it. I could totally go for that. But making it more of a thing actually in the book it just doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't feel good. It's not necessarily what I'm here to read, I guess. So I've been, yeah. It's not been my favorite. I guess it wasn't my favorite chapter of the book, but there's many chapters left, and so this is not me talking negatively of the book overall. But yeah, it really wasn't my favorite scene, and a bit funky. So
I'm gonna try to keep an open mind as long as I can as well. We've got a lot of pages ahead of us, so who knows where this is going or what this is gonna do. I'm gonna think back after finishing the book and probably make up my mind about how I feel about these early chapters. But we've talked about it already like a couple episodes ago, and the note I wrote in my notes I was taking was uncomfortable. It does make me feel a little bit uncomfortable for some of the reasons we've talked about before, and I'd be willing to like brush it off as just kind of silly, but there's like layers. There's a depth here to the flirting, and I can explain what I mean by that. Syl, there's the silly stuff, but then there's stuff like Syl is super excited in this scene that she gets to be Kaladin's scribe. She's like, "Oh, I'm gonna get to be your scribe. Oh, I could be your scribe." Think about that in the Alethi culture context. Who are the scribes of the people? It's their wives. A soldier, an officer, has his wife along with him out in the field to be his scribe. That's what Syl is referencing when she says, "Oh, I get to be your scribe." It's like layers of flirting going on here where we've got in-world references that Brandon has clearly built in. This is not just a oh haha romance. It's I think this is a thing.
I agree with you. I'm just curious if it's a bait and switch or if this is now like a full thing that we're going to be exploring, which I will say, I am not completely against the idea of a Spren and a human like being in a romantic relationship. I'm not completely against that idea. Not for Kaladin and Syl, though. The way that it's been cultivated up until now, it just does not feel correct. But we'll see where it goes.
I feel that's a good point. I'm very curious to see how this plays out. Like you said, like Eliot said, I read this and I didn't like it, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna come back. We'll look back at chapter 10 again after we've read the book. If it's just a jest thing, you move on. I'm kind of okay with that. I'd be if it does work out and they fall in love and get married. I'm very curious to see how that would be delivered in a fulfilling way. I don't know. It just wouldn't quite feel right to me. But there's many things which I haven't been gung ho about in our stories, which Brandon manages to make very significant and good in big moments. So I'm gonna have to just read it and find out, I guess, on this.
The other thing that's kind of throwing me on a bunch of this is, from what we can tell, the entirety of this book is 10 days. I
Yes.
hope we're not about to see the most whirlwind romance ever. If we go from no hints at all to full on romance in 10 days with our two characters here, that will bother me. But we'll see. I think there are definite outcomes of this thread that I will be perfectly fine with. I'm a little bothered by, I think, Trevor, you explained it well for me. The part that sticks for me is the childlikeness of Syl that we first met her. The relationship of Kaladin as like bringing her into this world as a child and helping her explore it and learn everything. For me to go from that to like romance is weird.
I agree. And for any of you commenters who would like to defend it, I'm not telling you not to, but we already have some on the comment section, which leads me to think that this is where this is going. So if you have read the book and then begin to defend something that we're discussing, be careful how you do that. Like, that's fine, but be careful how you do that, if no other reason than just for spoiler reasons. Like, if this is happening, I don't want to know yet. I want Brandon to tell me how he's intending it to. So if you guys would like to chime in on this, that's great. If you've read it, be very careful how you word it, because you could be spoiling it for us. So careful.
Paul said it. Raffo, I'm actually quite excited to read and find out about this, because I'm very curious where it's going. Very curious.
Anything else?
That's all I got. That's plenty for me to think on for a week.
All right. Like I said at the top of the episode, next week will be chapters 12, 13, and interlude 1 and 2. So if you're reading along with us, we will reconvene next week. Thanks for joining me, Paul and Eliot.
Fare thee well.
Fare thee well.